Welcome to Startup Out of the Box, a regular podcast about startups with Marco Silva and Victor Domingos.
On this episode, we're going to discuss about Agile Enterprise, where companies are and where they should be. And also we're going to discuss about startups during this Covid-19 pandemic. Here in the UK, some statistics about that, and also some Portuguese measures that the government put through for startups in Portugal. Hi, Marco. How are you? Still alive and virus-free?
I think I need a coffee.
Oh,
But yeah, all good.
yeah, I have one here. See?
Bastard.
I'm prepared. So
Yeah,
for
I thought it
yeah, that's a bad one. So for the first topic today, it's going to be about agile enterprises. I remember seeing on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, well, some time ago. This kind of time during this pandemic is just a social construct. I don't know what kind of the day of the week this is, but a few days ago, a long time ago, on LinkedIn they said that there was this kind of meme about what led the digital transformation in the company, if it was the CEO, the CIO,
Yep.
or the COVID-19. And I think most of them, they're just going to pick the COVID-19. And this means that obviously, because it's a hard times, people are looking at how can they innovate themselves, how can they bring different value to the company. So and obviously they want to be more agile. They've been discussing that some companies for some time ago, they want to reach the market faster. They want to implement new programs or reach out to customers faster, but they don't know how to do it. And before this pandemic, everything would kind of be a slow pace. It'd be kind of they didn't want to put a lot of effort into it, but right now they are being motivated to actually do agile transformation really fast. So we're talking about the agile enterprise, how enterprises can move to a different agile environment. And one of the notes that we have is how do actually companies balance whatever they have or whatever they which point they are at this moment, and how they can move to this agile enterprise. And I shared that with you about these statistics. So a lot of them, they are, when it comes to strategy, they are kind of so we have kind of two ways of looking at agile, right? We have the static enterprise, and they have the chaotic enterprise. And the balance is to find this kind of stuff in the middle, so you can drive to be more an agile enterprise. So some of the stats are about strategy. Some of them, they're just really chaotic, and they need to go into a more static plans when it comes to strategy. But a lot of them, when they're doing planning and budgeting and reviewing, they're kind of static. They don't move. They need to move to the more chaotic and innovate more. What do you think about this? Do you think that this latest statistics represents what you think about agile in the enterprises, or there's something missing here?
So, going to the point from the beginning, like we're seeing more enterprises becoming more agile. I'm going to say that between quotes, because like the concept for enterprise, the agile differs from everyone and every company, and who's the consultant you're paying for. But like they're based on what I'm reading and speaking with some people, yeah, you do see a lot of big organizations changing the way they work and moving forward plans that they had like for 1 year, 2 years. They're doing it like in a matter of weeks because they realize, yeah, we need to adapt quick. The way we were doing things before doesn't work anymore. For example, I follow on Twitter the CEO from Box.net, and I think he's one as the CIO or one of the GMs from Shopify. And both of them have been mentioning that, like recurring every day, like they've been talking to big organizations, big enterprises, and they have done more business in the last couple of weeks than they did maybe in the last year together, because of the number of companies that want to take advantage of the capabilities that Box provides or that Shopify provides. So from the enterprise that wants to share documents, allow collaboration between their employees, but also to retailers that didn't have an online presence, and now they're turning to Shopify to provide that online presence. So, and I think like a lot of organizations are realizing that a lot of their culture that they add, a lot of the processes that they add, kind of reflects in this chart that you sent. They were too static, they were vague, and there was a lot of bureaucracy involved. So there is, for there is a lot of stuff that needs to be that needs to be changed in the company, and maintain that change once this situation is over. So strategy needs to be more adaptive. Like I think we kind of learned from the startup world, like you can't make a strategy for 5 years. You can think about it. You can define like ideally this is what in the perfect world we would like to happen, but you know that most likely there's a 99% chance that strategy won't be valid in the end of a year. A lot of enterprises are now realizing that, okay, let's plan for the future, but realize that we need to change. We need to have a different way of doing leadership and culture, give more freedom to our employees, let people learn, let people be more engaged, maybe let our employees take more decision and not depend on a C-level to validate every single piece of decision that happens. Bring a bit more autonomy, so less bureaucracy, like I said.
Do you think that
and also like in the business
do you think that on the technology side, because when we talk about enterprises, obviously on startups they are more keen on using brand new technology and everything looks good and shiny and they want to use this kind of stuff. But when you think that because this data that we got says that more on enterprises, they are kind of more in the monolithic systems when they develop their own systems, and they need to move to a more modular systems, so cloud and innovation and that kind of stuff. Do you think that even on startups they need to be even more innovative? They need to go with containers, they need to reshape their technology, or they just need to continue to do whatever they are at the moment?
Like technology wise, I think it's more of use what fits your need. Don't try to imitate Google or Netflix just because a big company uses containers. That doesn't mean that you should use containers. Or just because a big company uses microservices like Monzo, they have 1,600 microservices. It's like, if you're a startup, small, keep it light, keep it nimble. That should be your focus, especially in this situation and while you're growing. So Agile for startups would be, don't overcomplicate what you have, even on a technology level. Keep it nimble, keep it simple. Don't change your technology every week. That's not being agile, that's being
realistic.
I'm thinking about the word. And realistic. And that's a more polite way of
exactly. And don't deploy on a Friday. Never deploy stuff on the Friday. Neither on Monday. Just pick between Tuesday and Thursday. It's a good day to deploy stuff on your startup.
I think that's a different conversation. I think you should aim to be able to deploy on Fridays, but you have to realize, and that also comes into the part of this conversation of agile and a lockdown and people missing, or you have to lay off people. Like, make sure that your systems are automated where they can be. So if you want to deploy, you know that if whatever you deploy is going to work, is going to be proper, is going to be valid. You don't want to wake up people at the middle of the night. But also, if someone leaves your company for whatever reason, you don't want to be dependent on that person. So all of that is kind of agile in some sense. You want to automate it, you want the company to be lean and fast moving and not being dependent on one person.
Yeah, good. So that was pretty much about the Agile Enterprise. We talk about this statistics. The next one, and because we also spoke on the last episode about the Future Fund, so which is the fund that the UK has for startups. On this one, we're going to talk about some statistics that showed up. So there was a survey led by a company that they asked startups so accelerators, for them to ask their own startups about the mitigation measures that they are trying to achieve during this COVID-19. So what kind of measures they think that they need to put into place. So it's a large survey for some startups here in the UK. Some statistics, they are just kind of caught my eye. Obviously, I think that 60% of them they have successfully negotiated their workspace rent or are in the process of doing so. We've been discussing here on this show about how the workspace and co-working and stuff like that will change in the near future because of this. So it's good to see that startups are actually thinking about that, and probably the whole relationship with space and going to an office or going to co-working is going to change definitely for everyone, not just startups but also normal enterprises. And then 43%, which is a lot, stopped online advertising. So they stopped all of the kind of their media efforts when they come to advertising. 30% said that unfortunately they had to cut salaries across the company by at least 15%. So some less perks. Also, around 50% of the companies, they said that they stopped hiring. And I remember a few months ago posting something on LinkedIn saying that if you're not taking this time to hire or train your employees, then you're just losing time and losing them probably. So either way, almost 50%, 49% they stop hiring, and another 32 have slowed hiring, which is a lot. So because they need certainty, and right now no one can have that. Obviously, that's going to be a major hiccup when it comes to hire. But overall, around 68% of the startups that respond to this survey, they expect that this year the revenue will drop a quarter. So 25% of their revenue expected is going to be cut up by this. Do you think, from your point of view, this is a realistic kind of survey, or it's I don't know, it doesn't represent?
Yeah, I do think it does represent. It's from some stuff, some scene I've been reading online, watching on Twitter, listening on Twitter. Some people I've been talking to around London. Does reflect a bit of what's happening. And I have two of my friends that work in advertising companies, and they basically reduce their working hours, kind of like 50%. The other one also like to only 65%, and they suspended most of the projects for new stuff. So they're just taking time for technical debt, cleaning house, because most of the clients stopped their online advertising at the moment. Like salaries, I think they're being cut across from startups to big enterprises. Workspace rents. I can talk. Like on that side, I can see, for example, the co-working space where I go to, they reduced kind of like in 85% the cost of the co-working space, and now they are providing kind of like events online. They're organizing regular conferences, meetups, like with different people from the industry, to kind of like look. I know you guys can't use the co-working space, but yeah, still some benefits that we want to provide you guys. At least there's some money still going into the co-working space, so they can keep the doors open. And they also renegotiated their renting costs. So they still need to pay rent, but they renegotiated that. So I think this does reflect. I think some are a bit
high.
Like you mentioned, like the 50% for hiring freeze.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit high, but might match the general landscape.
Well, bear in mind that we're talking about startups, right? So it's not just enterprises; it's startups. I'm guessing that if you're a Microsoft and Amazon, well, we heard about Amazon. Amazon is going to hire 15,000 more employees or something like that, just because of this.
Yeah, they're a beast.
Yeah, they're massive hiring freeze right now. Spree. Yeah. So
like I know one example of a company. I know one example of a company in the US, for example, that they fired like a few dozen sales engineers.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people from the competition went to the competition because, well, for the competition was like, well, free trained sales engineers. They know already about the industry, so might as well just hire them and wait like an extra 2 months for the market to come back.
Yeah, true.
So some companies are taking advantage of it.
True. The same kind of survey was made in the US, some sort of. So they tried to reach out to some startups. Actually, this is it's not just the US, it's more global. So the Startup Genome, which is a group, kind of surveyed 45 countries and a lot of startups around those countries. Bottom line, 74% of the startups have trimmed staff. So if we attach that to the not just hiring, but actually chopping down employees and laying them off, not doing with the furlough, it's a lot. It's a lot of companies that they're right now trying to trim staff. We knew about Uber, pretty much every company, Lime, Bud, all of those mobility companies, because they couldn't operate. It's an issue, obviously, but also the most worrying thing is, and because some companies also in Portugal did this, they had a massive investment round last year, and right now 65% of some of the companies says that they have money for less than 6 months. Which is kind of appealing, right? Because some of them, they just say, well, we got a huge amount of investment, but right now, we need government support. And some people are saying, well, we shouldn't support companies. Government shouldn't support companies. As an overall, this kind of brings the whole Covid-19 thing to a more grim environment, because it's 75% of the kind of the companies trimming people. It's not just not hiring; it's actually firing people, and that's going to have a massive impact even in the on the market, don't you think?
In the general economy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like firing so many people will have a massive impact in the general economy. Like, and you can see now in the United States, we're talking about 20 million unemployed. Like, it's crazy number. I think we did already speak about this. Like, I think that there's some support of the government to these startups, small companies, SMEs. It's a good idea, depending on how that support is done. And most of the support is coming from convertible notes. So the governments are loaning money that if the companies then can't pay back, that those loans are converted into equity. So these kind of, at least, like, they're trying to get the money back. If not, they're going to play kind of like a VC. Let's play the risk game and see if we can recover some of the money. But at least, like, people are still employed. There's still money in the economy. They're not asking for unemployment benefits. So I think it's going to help a lot of these companies at least survive the next 2-3 months.
Yeah. Also, do you think that because some of the companies they were having massive perks, do you think that's going to change in the future? Like lunch and snacks and coffee and this kind of stuff. Do you think that's going to be the first thing that companies going to reduce when we return back to work?
I think so. I feel like in the next couple of months they will reduce, because they will think about it like it's not needed. Like, we know that this is just something to show and flamboyant stuff. But maybe in 2 years it will come back again.
Oh well, right. So for the
don't know much to say about that.
For the last part of this topic, which is the focus on what measures the Portuguese government is putting into place to help Portuguese startups. They launched 2 weeks ago, give or take, package of measures to help the startups, and they were roughly around kind of 3 different types of those. The first one was, we're going to create a fund, we're going to help the startups, and it's going to be if they can't pay whatever, it's kind of a loan. If they can't pay whatever we're providing back to them, then we're going to take equity after that. They're going to have a kind of a startup voucher, which is to help startups for a period of 3 months with some also liquidity as well. They have vouchers for incubation because they wanted to ensure that any startup that was in incubation phase, they could continue to be incubated during this pandemic. And they had they had a thing called bridge financing, which is kind of looking reinforce the liquidity of investors within the company up to 30% and helping them to do this. Do you think that these measures, especially in Portugal, due to obviously it's a small country, startups there are really it's a really tough market to prosper. Do you think that the government measures are enough to help the startups there?
Well, the cost of running a startup in Portugal is low comparing to the rest of Europe or Silicon Valley, stuff like that. So these measures, they seem reasonable to help out. We're talking about helping with rent, helping pay salaries, injecting a bit of capital to keep the companies going. So they do seem like a reasonable set of actions that the government can put into place. I would expect some more regarding, for example, tax-wise, stuff like if your company is doing below X amount, 1,000 euros, stuff like that, will like forgive your taxes for the next couple of months, stuff like that. So I think that's a bit what the government could do to help like small companies in Portugal. But like as a base measures, I think they are good base measures.
Okay, good. Well, I think that any measure in Portugal to help startups, it's good. Obviously, the government needs to have some money back after all of this, not just with startups, but also with companies. So I think, yeah, makes sense. Not sure if all of these startups know these measures and can apply for it. It's going to be an issue. This was launched with the help of a bunch of accelerators and investment companies there in Portugal. So I think that they at least
including Portugal Ventures.
Exactly, they're going to have access to some kind of supports. As I said on the last episode, we talk about the UK venture fund, so it's a different thing here. It's a different type of measures. I think that obviously the governments need to look at startups, otherwise it's going to be an issue. I think that if you look at the previous statistics of startups not hiring or furloughing people or trimming their costs or even employees, it needs to be balanced, right? So the money that you get from the government needs to go towards something, not just your current operation, but also the investment of probably not firing people. So you need to keep them on the payroll, and it needs to come with a certain condition, right? The same one with the companies here, right? So if you're furloughing people, you shouldn't fire them. I think that because all of the measures that the Portuguese government put forward was to invest or to provide liquidity to companies, but without any kind of return of, well, you're going to put the money, so the conditions are you can't fire, or you need to hire more, or it's just for sustainability. So it needs to come with a certain conditions, and actually I haven't seen those from this package of measures, but I'm guessing that someone is going to ask for that, and we're going to see that in the near future. That's
we should see that in the next couple of days.
Yeah, exactly. So that was pretty much it for this episode 28 of Startup Out of the Box. Still at home and safe. So that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for listening to us and watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.